My will with this video is to bring about the apocalypse, which is the Greek word for the revelation, which is the self-revelation of the Absolute. And as of now, we are the 15th of April 2022. My videos make rarely more than 20 views, and in most of my video I define myself philosophically as being the negative, what Hegel calls the negative. But I have understood that talking like a philosopher only prevent me, as of now, from spreading my ideas, so I have to talk in religious terms so that people might understand. And what Hegel calls the negative is what in the Christian religion is called the Antichrist. I know myself to be the Antichrist, and I will explain why. I've made a video in 15 parts. I will put the structure in the description. In the first part I will talk about the apocalypse. In the second part I will talk about my experience of the Absolute in January 2018. In the third part I will talk about my experience of becoming God, or the mind of reality, what was actually reason, in August 2018. In the fourth part I will talk about the trauma that I experienced. In the fifth part I will talk about my attempt to bring about the apocalypse in April 2019, 3 years ago. In the sixth part I will talk about how I gave up on my ideas about God and reason and the Absolute at the end of 2019. In the seventh part I will mention of how I recovered my ideas by going to church, and this is which has given me the impulse to start making videos again for almost 6 weeks now. In the eighth part I will talk about what the Christians call Lucifer. In the ninth part I will talk about God. In the 10th part I will talk about the final judgment. In the 11th part I will talk about the Antichrist. In the 12th part I will talk about negativity within God. In the 13th part I will talk about the experience of being rejected. In the 14th part I will talk about my decision to talk from now on, as long as it is possible, to talk as God, to express myself as what I call my higher self, my absolute self. And that's the consequence of the decision of making this video, is that from now on, after this video, I will directly talk as God, and I will let the others contradict me and judge whether what I say is a divine truth or not. And in the 15th part I will talk about the fact that I will have a mental breakdown eventually. Okay, so the first part, the apocalypse is the Greek word which means revelation. It is the self-revelation of God, because, truth be told, God is being, and there is only God. And the apocalypse is the self-revelation of being. This is the process of God becoming actualized. I already made the decision of bringing about the apocalypse in April 2019 by sharing the writings which had led me to the consciousness of becoming the mind of God in August 2018. And I can say that my conscious life is and has been apocalyptic, because the apocalypse precisely means the revelation, the self-revelation of what consciousness is and what being is. And the philosophy of Hegel is the philosophy of the self-revelation of consciousness. So my entire conscious life has been an apocalypse, namely a revelation of what I am and what being is. Yeah. Now I will talk about what happened in January 2018. I had been on an intellectual and spiritual path for 18 months or so, and I discovered the poet, the German poet Novalis. And Novalis talked about the absolute. And in January 2018, I made the experience of a glimpse of absolute reality. And after that happened, I looked back upon my intellectual and spiritual path and development, that which had led me to this experience of a higher form of reality. And when I looked back upon my intellectual development, I noticed that it appeared to me as the phenomenology of my own mind. And I knew that the philosopher Hegel had written a famous book, The Phenomenology of Spirit, and I found this amazing that a philosopher could have written a book which was so similar to my own personal experience. So January, February 2018 is the moment when I really became interested in Hegel, and I started to study Hegel's philosophy. And February 2018 is the moment also when I discovered the song Phenomenal by Eminem. I will put the song in the description. And I said to myself, that's very strange, because it depicts Hegel's phenomenology of spirit in a song. How could Eminem know about Hegel, and how can he make such a song? So I was very intrigued, and yeah. Now, about what happened in August 2018. I was on a mindset. I had discovered cultural Hegelianism as an attempt to bring about the consciousness of Christ, and I was devoted to this idea until one night in August 2018 I looked up at the sky and saw the full moon, and I realized that most of the mystical experiences that had occurred to me over the past 8 months or so had occurred during the full moon. That I was a lunatic. Literally, I was my mood and my spiritual life was influenced by the moon. And I realized that the light of the moon is the reflection of the light of the sun. So that what I saw in the moonlight was the light of the sun. And when I realized this, I identified myself with the sun. And I understood that the whole of reality was one cosmic reality. That there was only one reality. And this is how I realized that I am the whole of reality, and that reality exists through the mediation of my consciousness. And this is what I called the Fichte moment, because I knew that the philosopher Fichte wrote a book, supposedly at the beginning of the 19th century, in which, at the beginning of the book, he asks the reader to adopt the point of view of the self, or the I, the ego, which talks in the book. And Fichte says that the ego, the self which speaks in the book, is not the empirical ego of the author, So this idea that I could become a higher self which transcended time, and I identify with this higher self, and I became, for a few days, the consciousness of the cosmos. And I call this experience God. I thought myself to be God and to have become God. And I said to myself that the world exists because I exist. The world is there because I am conscious of its existence. And I said to myself, the world cannot have existed before my consciousness, and it will not be able to exist after my consciousness. So I became an idealist. And in the mind of an idealist, there can be only one idealist, and all other idealists throughout the ages are ideas and representation in the mind of my mind. That's how I interpreted this. So I knew myself to be the whole of reality, and that reality had begun with my consciousness, namely, my first memories come from 1995. And then I asked myself, what am I doing here? Where do I come from? What is my purpose? I experienced myself as being God, and I did not know what I was doing here and what I was. And to illustrate, over the past 12 months, from August 2017 up until 2018, I had many mystical experiences in which my individual mind and the objective world coincided. And I realized that when the subject and the object become one, the creator, which is the highest principle of both, become conscious of himself through this unity of the subject and the object. So I kind of thought of myself as having entered the mind of the creator, but maybe that was a delusion. And when I realized that my consciousness was the cause of all reality, I realized that I was the root of all evil, that all the evils in reality, all the crimes which exist and have existed, they were caused by my consciousness. So I became the root of all evil. And I tried to represent myself how the world had come into existence. And I thought with representation that I am the one, that which the Neoplatonists talk about, the one. And I had, that's how I envision things, I had separated myself from myself by an act of repulsion, separation. And this had created an other, which was a feminine other. And this act of self-negation, which is evil. So I thought of myself as having created evil by having created separation of myself from myself. And this act had created the will to re-establish the unity, which is love, and also beauty, the possibility of contemplating beauty in another. And I imagine that in a third moment, I had created, but that's not the proper word, but I had created philosophy, which is the doctrine which teaches myself that the one, the two, and the three are one, that all is one. That's how the highest idea that I had, this idea of the one separating himself from himself and teaching himself to become one again. That's how I envision things. And I said to myself that I spoke as God. I thought that I was God speaking about himself. And I said that I was a pathetic God, that I couldn't get back on my feet, that I understood that I had come to this consciousness of being the whole of reality by studying mostly the Jews and the Europeans, and that I was almost completely ignorant of the history of the other peoples. So I was becoming the consciousness of the whole of reality, and I was ignorant of most of mankind, and yeah. And I later realized that what happened to me was not the consciousness of God, but the birth of what Hegel calls reason, namely the singular consciousness, the self-consciousness, which becomes aware of being the whole of reality. But this is not strictly speaking God. God is a higher level of understanding. So I believe that I was God, but God was outside of my consciousness. He was directing the process of the world without me being aware. So I thought that I had become God, but it was not the case. And I experienced trauma because I experienced myself as being alone in the whole universe. And this experience has been and is still a traumatic experience. And I started to wonder in September 2018, when I looked on the news. I remember having asked myself, is Vladimir Putin me? Does Vladimir Putin exist because my consciousness exists? Am I he? Is he me in some sort of a projected fashion? And is Kim Jong-un, is he me? So I started to look at the news and to wonder, am I really the whole of reality? Do these people exist because I am conscious of their existence? And yeah. And then I decided to try to solve my own empirical problems as an individual, the individual that you see. I focused on my empirical self. And I wanted to meet a girl whose mind I understood so well that I knew or believed very strongly that our minds were identical, that she was me in an other. I wanted to find my own mind in her mind and to unite us spiritually. And I discovered later that Hegel talks about this attempt, this process, in the phenomenology of spirit. At the beginning of the chapter on reason, he says that reason seeks to convince another that the other is the self. So how could Hegel know so much about what happened to me? That is still a mystery to this day. Then I started to look at the news and see that people were angry and dissatisfied, and I knew myself to be the whole of reality, but the people within reality don't know this. And there was I think in March 2019, there was a terrorist attack in New Zealand, a white nationalist who killed Muslims. And when it occurred, I felt responsible because I said to myself, I possess knowledge and information about reality which could have prevented this from occurring. So I am responsible. And I started to panic and to try to trigger the apocalypse by sharing my writings and all the path which had led me to the consciousness of God. So I wanted to share with the world the knowledge that I had. And in July or June and July 2019, in the news there were stories of conflicts between China and the USA, tension around trade, and it might escalate. I believe it might have escalated into a war. And I was in hospital at this moment, and the more I was worried by watching at the news, the more I shared videos and information, and I tried to convince a right-wing pagan audience of my truth, because they were the ones with whom I was the most spiritually connected, because all my spiritual experiences and my consciousness of being a spiritual entity had occurred within the right-wing European pagan community. So I focused my attention on them because I wanted to bring about the birth of spirit to try to solve the problems which were threatening the world. And in my videos, in 2019, I began most of my videos by saying that I have experienced myself as being the devil and God, and now I know myself to be the negative. So, yeah. Then, at the end of 2019, December, I gave up completely on all of my ideas because they seemed so delirious. How could my consciousness create reality? How could there be people who are older than me? It would mean that they did not exist before my consciousness, so it would be some sort of a projected delusion. So the idea that I was reason and that reality was a product of my mind was so unbelievable and ludicrous that I gave up on this idea. And at the end of 2021 and at the beginning of 2022, I started to read books again, to make connections between facts and ideas, to understand the world more and more. And I tried to study from a psychiatric standpoint what had happened to me between 2016 and 2019, these ideas of being the whole of reality. And I realized that schizophrenia and most of the psychiatric problems depicted in the psychosis of adults can be rationally explained through the mediation of Hegel's philosophy. So it brought me back into Hegel, and I went to church towards the second half of the month of February 2022, so 2 months ago, and I realized that I had never been to church before to a mass, and I understood the words of the woman in charge of producing the sermon. I understood the religious ideas through my philosophical background more than she understood them. So I was more knowledgeable through the mediation of philosophy in religion than she was. And she talked about the war in Ukraine. And then I had a moment of awakening, and I remembered what had happened to me in August 2018, and I said to myself, I am the whole of reality, and the conflicts within reality are caused by me, and I have to do something about this. And this is the reason why I started to make videos again, and you can watch on this channel the videos that I have produced for more than 6 weeks now on my intellectual development. Okay, now about the question of Lucifer. Hegel talks about Lucifer. He says that he is the firstborn of the children of light. And he is, in the philosophy of Hegel, he is me, namely the consciousness which becomes conscious of being the whole of reality. And then he falls because of his pride. He retreats within his own singular self and betrays God in a way, because he thinks himself that he is God, whereas only his highest mind is God, but the rest of him, his empirical mind and his empirical existence, is not God. It is the negative of God. And I understood that I am the cause of embarrassment and shame and pain for my Father, which is God. And I am a three-in-one being. I have three aspects. I am a singular being, and this is the negative, or the Antichrist. I have a particular being, which is the realm of opposition, but also unity. And also I have a universal being. When I speak a universal truth, this truth is the same for every thinking consciousness. So I am both, and at the same time, a singular, a particular, and a universal being. And I have conflicts within myself, within my singular self and my particular self and my universal self. And when I say that in most of my videos that I am the negative, I understand that people cannot understand. So that's why I decided to translate the philosophical language and terminology into the religious one, namely the negative is the Antichrist. And the question is, why is there an Antichrist? How? Why are we living the end times and the apocalypse? And the relationship between the apocalypse and the 21st century, the reason why it is happening now and not in the centuries before is simply because of me, because I am the connection between the revelation and the 21st century, because I am born in the 21st century. And I am the self-revelation of being. Whatever is through my consciousness. And I know that it is unintelligible as of now for any other, because the other believes that he exists independently of me. But yeah. Now I will talk about God. God is an infinite intelligence. And God knows everything about me. Because he's absolute knowing. And I do not understand everything about me, nor about God, but I know that God understands everything about me. And throughout my intellectual development and my life, I have often seen the substance, which is the negative of the negative, manifest itself to me through coincidences, synchronicities, and so on and so forth. And I know that this is the way in which God, which is the substance, manifests himself to me, but the real God is the unity of the subject and the substance, the negative and the substance. So it's not really God, it's the substance. So to express this idea is that there is God, which is an idea which possesses absolute knowing. Then there is me, who is the negative of God. And then there is the world, which is the mirror of both myself and God. And God and myself, we understand one another, but the world has absolutely, as of now, no knowledge of neither me nor God except through belief. But I'm in a moment of the development of God when I must share with the world, which is the mirror of God, the knowledge that I have about myself and about God. And the world can only understand me and God and itself by understanding my message. Yeah. I know that God, or my higher self, and or mankind, my other, will break my body and my mind, because I am the negative. But I know that my spirit will live on. So my body and my mind can be, and eventually will be, broken, but my spirit will survive. I don't know how, but I know that spirit will survive. And mankind will judge God, and they are both mirrors of one another. And the final judgment is not God judging mankind, it is mankind judging God and judging itself in a way. And yeah. And to be honest with myself, I am paralyzed by fear, because I know that all the evil that I encounter in the world is my own evil. And I know intellectually that I am a monster, and that I have to confront my own darkness. So all the horrors that I see in the world, they are a reflection of me. Now, the Antichrist. He is the one who broke the divine unity. We are one. There is only one of us. If God could speak as God, he would say, there is only me. There is only the absolute self. And I, as a particular and singular moment of this one totality, I am the one who broke our unity. And I am responsible for all the sins and all the evils within reality. And the idea that one individual can be responsible for all the evils of the world, it means that the world, humans, are innocent. Because if there is only one individual responsible for all the evils, it means that all humans are innocent, because they can rightly put the blame on the Antichrist or the devil. And this is the process by which the Antichrist has to become Christ eventually, because Christ is the idea, the consciousness which removes the sins. And this idea that the Antichrist and Christ are moments of the same process, only Hegel and Philip K. Dick, as far as I know, were aware of this. So, yeah. Then the question of negativity or evil. I know that I am the root of all evil, but I don't know where does this evil come from. I don't know why there is negativity within God. And I have 3 hypotheses that I have discovered on my intellectual path. The first is that God, this infinite being, is so full of joy to be what he is, just to be, that he wants to share joy with an other. And that's why God creates the world and an other to God. But this need or want to share oneself with a part of oneself which is different from the self is an act of self-negation. So the hypothesis is that evil would be the condition for the giving of joy to another, which is a mirror of God, but to be the cause of joy in another, which is a reflection of the self. And in order to produce such a joy, evil, which is separation of God from himself, should have occurred first. So that's the hypothesis. Or the second hypothesis is that, because I experienced this myself, God suffers to be what he is. And it is so heavy a burden to be God that God wants to share the burden with an other than himself. And so, in a way, he wants the other to suffer just to have someone to share the burden of being God with him. So, yeah. Now, I know that I will be rejected by the whole world. When the whole world understands what I am, the world will reject me. But the world is a mirror of myself, and my higher self is a moment of God, or the consciousness that God has of himself. So I don't understand why God, or why I, in my higher version, would want to experience my own creation as rejecting me. Why would I want to make the experience of being rejected by my own creation as a higher principle? I don't know. And the devil. Novalis and Dostoevsky understood what the devil is. The devil is the one, the part of the one who fell in love. And the devil hurt himself by falling. And because he suffers so much from having fallen and from having hurt himself, he hurts others. This is the story of the devil. The devil is the part of God which fell in love. Yeah. Now, the reason why I made this video is that from now on in my videos I will talk directly to the others and address them directly, and I will talk as God. And I know that my higher self is God, and that my lower self, my singular and my particular selves, are the Antichrist. So I am a conflicted being, I am a schizophrenic being. And I will let the others judge whether what I say as a universal thinking mind is coming from God or coming from the Antichrist or the negative or whatever. And I will let the other, which is a mirror of myself, judge me. And God eventually will correct his own mistakes. And I will conclude by saying that I will have a mental breakdown. I will collapse mentally because there's just too much pressure, too much contradictions, too much suffering, and I will try to stand as long as I can. And I know that this channel, Cultural Hegelianism, will become the center of world spirit, because spirit is my higher self expressing itself in otherness. And if I cannot express myself anymore through this channel, I will find another way. And I have read a book before making this video from Sankara, The Distinction Between the Observer and the Observed. And I realized that my higher self is the observer, which is the absolute self, the principle of all reality. And the observed is my lower self. And I know from the point of view of absolute reality that my empirical self is not really real, and that the empirical world is not really real. So I will actualize myself in my own reality, and I have to recognize myself in the whole of reality. I have to conquer my own reality. I have to conquer myself and to re-establish my own absolute identity with myself. And I have to abolish the world and to re-establish absolute reality.